One of my favorite television shows of all time, even though it's not on the air anymore, one of my favorite television shows was Kitchen Nightmares by Gordon Ramsay. You ever see that show? I love this show. He's angry at everybody. He's yelling at everybody. And it feels like at the end of the show, he's cooking the same food for every show, right? It's just like the same dish. And I love it. But a couple of years ago, I don't know if you saw this, but he actually went viral on the internet on a short video that he did on the perfect way to scramble eggs. Have you ever seen that? And I just loved that video because it is not the way I scramble eggs. And when I saw his eggs, I thought to myself, those were amazing. I have got to learn how to make eggs like that. And it's pretty simple. In fact, I have the instructions here on the screen, if we can put them on the screen, on how to make the perfect scrambled eggs. All right? Crack the eggs in a bowl and mix. Add butter to the bowl. Pour egg into the heated pan and stir constantly until firm. Let me tell you something. Add a little bit of salt and pepper, and these are beautiful scrambled eggs. So what I thought I'd do today is I brought a pan. I brought some butter. And I brought a towel because I tend to make a mess of things. And then I brought some eggs. Now, I know those of you in the front, you're thinking, this is not going to be good. But let me put this aside. So, the instructions are pretty clear, right? And here's the thing. If we don't follow Gordon's instructions exactly as he said to do them, you don't get the same effect, right? So what if instead of doing it the way he says to do it, I decided that I was going to do it the way I want to do it? And I wanted to start with, pour the eggs into the pan first. And I'm going to stir them constantly until they're firm. Oh, look, they're pretty firm. All right. Then I'm going to add some butter. Okay, pretend that was butter. Right? And then once I add the butter, I crack the egg into the bowl. I crack the egg into the bowl and mix. All right, John, come on up here and tell me how great these eggs are. No, trust me, you don't want these eggs. Now, you see what I'm saying? I didn't do it in the order he said to do it, and now I have this bowl of egg that none of you want to. Well, there might be some of you in here who are thinking, I want to eat this. But most of us are going to be like, no, that's not what I want to eat. Because you have to do it in the right order. There are some things that you just have to do it in the right order. And if you don't do it in the right order, you mess everything up and end up with something that nobody wants. And we know all about this, don't we, men? How many of you have had somebody, usually your wife, take you to IKEA, you buy something, you take it home, and you decide that you're going to assemble it the way you want to assemble it? Who needs instructions? We can put it together. And so we start, and sometimes it doesn't come out that way, right? Or have you ever taken something apart to fix it, and then you put it all back together, and there's like 3 pieces left? Where did these come from? And this is not unique to men. We all do this, men, women. I mean, come on, how many times have you bought something from the grocery store and there's instructions on it, and so you take it out and you start cooking, you throw the instructions in the garbage, and then 3 seconds later you go back to the garbage and open it up and go inside and look at the instructions because you forgot what it was like. Right? I have done this, we all do this. And we all know that if we don't do things in the right order, we're not going to get the result that we want. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because we have been talking as a church about the purpose of this church. given. It's a responsibility that we're giving. And so we call this the Great Commission because it is a great duty for all of us. Jesus had been crucified, and he had been buried, and then he rose again. He was resurrected, and he was walking around, and his disciples were freaking out because they didn't know if this was really him or not. And one day he tells some of his friends, he says, go tell my guys to meet me on top of this mountain. And so Jesus goes to the mountain. His guys meet him on the mountain. This is right before Jesus is about to ascend to heaven, and Jesus leaves them with his instruction, with his commission, what we call the Great Commission. And he gives it to them in this way, as it's recorded by one of Jesus' disciples, one of the men who knew him the most, a man named Matthew. Matthew would write this, recording this event. He would say, and Jesus came and said to them, the first thing he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Authority, all of it. There are only two places, right? There's just heaven and earth. There's nowhere else. And so he's saying that I have all the authority. In other words, what I'm about to tell you isn't a suggestion. And then he says, go therefore. Now, the reason it says go therefore is because they're talking in English, and how they're translating it back then, they just wanted it to sound fancy. So he said, go therefore. But today, what we would say is therefore, or because of the fact that I have been given all authority, he says, therefore, you don't have a choice here. I'm talking with authority, therefore go. Right? So he says, go therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. This is the Great Commission. And the Great Commission has 4 clear steps. Go, make disciples, baptize, and teach. 4 steps. And now here's the thing. Just like Gordon Ramsay's recipe for making scrambled eggs, you have to do them in order. You have to do them in order. Because if you don't, you're going to mess everything up. And this is where, over the years, church people have gotten it wrong. In fact, if you are here today, or if you're watching us online, and you are just determined to never have anything to do with church, never have anything to do with God because of the Christians that you have met, this is the reason why. Because we got it out of order. And the problem that we've always had is that instead of starting with go, do you know what we start with? We start with teach. You know what we teach? We teach the you shoulds. You should go to church. You should read your Bible. You should stop smoking. You should stop drinking. You should stop living with your boyfriend or with your girlfriend. You should stop dressing that way. You should stop watching those movies or listening to that music. We teach the you shoulds. Now, should they? I don't know, probably. It's probably a good idea to not smoke and not drink too much, right? Would their life be significantly better if they did? Probably so. But that is not the issue. Jesus told us what to do, and he told us the order to do it in. And if you get it out of order, you're going to mess it up. Rick Warren said this. He said, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And if you start with teaching the you shoulds, people aren't going to care what you have to say. You can't teach anybody who isn't willing to teach. Any teacher knows that. Any parent knows that. You can't teach them if they don't want to learn. And so, if we look at the Great Commission and the order that Jesus gave us in, what we recognize, what we need to understand, what I think we all know, is that you can't teach someone unless they're willing, and you don't know they're willing until they show that they are willing by being baptized. And you can't baptize them, you can't say to them, hey, you need to make this decision until you make them a disciple. And you can't make them a disciple if you are sitting at home watching Friends all day, which is the greatest show of all time. There we go. If those of you who don't know what I'm talking about or watching us online, you don't know why they're cheering over there, watch last week's message. All right? Because, in fact, you need to watch last week's message because this sets everything up that we're doing today. But when we decide that we are going to go, it makes the difference. See, you have to go in order to make disciples. You have to make a person a disciple in order to get them to a place where they want to say, yes, I'm deciding to place my faith and trust in Jesus, and so I want to be baptized. And when they are baptized, when they make that commitment, then you can say, okay, now that you're in, now that you're one of us, here's how we all become more like Jesus. But in order to do it, you have to have it in the right order. Now today, what I want to do is I want to focus on one of those four. I'm not going to focus so much on go. I'm not going to focus so much on baptizing or even on the teaching. I want to focus on what I think is the most difficult yet the most rewarding one of the four, and that is making disciples. Because you see, making disciples is the one that takes the longest time. It takes the longest time. But making disciples is the one that is the most rewarding. And I believe it is the most misunderstood. Out of all of the four, it's the simplest, but it's also the hardest. So before I go any further, let me just say this. You don't make disciples in church. Listen to me. You don't make disciples in church. The church is not where you make disciples. The church is where we go to prepare to make disciples. The church is where we go, where we celebrate making disciples. The church is where we go, where we're inspired to get off of our butts and go and make disciples. But you cannot make disciples here. You can't make disciples from your living room. You can't make disciples staying in your bedroom all day and swiping and what all the things that you do with your thumbs on your phone, right? If you are going to make disciples, you have got to go. And you have to go where? You go where there are people that aren't disciples, right? You can't go to church functions and think you're going to make disciples there because everyone there is already a Christian. You have to go where people aren't disciples. And listen, the going is easy. Making the decision to go is easy. Actually going is the hard part. Now, I want you to hear this because this is where that misunderstanding part comes in. Discipling someone and making someone a disciple are two different things. Hear what I'm saying? Discipling someone and making someone a disciple are two different things. Christians, followers of Jesus, we disciple other disciples. Your pastors disciple you. Your connection group leaders disciple you. Your youth leader disciples you. Your parents, they disciple you. Discipling is what happens after you are baptized and become a follower of Jesus. But when you make someone a disciple, that person, when you meet them, that person in the state that they are in, they are not a disciple. They're not a Christian. They are not a follower of Jesus yet. And our task is to make them into a disciple, to mold them, to shape them. You're not forcing them, right? This isn't like your mom makes you clean your room. Show them the picture. That's not my room. Yeah, I'm sorry. Not me, right? So this isn't like your mom is making you clean your room. Or this isn't like your wife makes you watch Virgin River. Yeah, she's over there because I'm the one that makes her watch. Such a great show. The word make here in this, actually make disciples, we translate it as two words, but in the Greek, it's one word. And what it means is to mold, to shape, to create. to take something that isn't a disciple and then turn it into a disciple. And there is a tried and true process for creating disciples, and it's actually quite simple. And Jesus modeled this process over and over again. And so what I want to do with the rest of the time that we have today is I want us to look at how Jesus created or shaped or molded people into being a disciple, and a simple 4-step process. Now, Jesus was able to get his message across to people when they wanted to learn from him. They wanted to learn from him. So to help us remember this 4-step process, to get the message of Jesus across to people, we're going to use the word across, spelled weird. But you can see it, right? Across. That's going to help us get this. And then, so we're going to start with the A. And A is the first step, and it is awareness. Awareness. Making disciples starts with making people aware of you in a positive and authentic way. You have to have both. And listen, social media today has made this very, very difficult for us. Because there are a lot of people out there who use social media. They create a very positive impression of themselves, but it's not very authentic. And there are a lot of people out there on social media who leave a very, very authentic impression of themselves. And it's not very positive. See, Jesus knew that before people are going to be willing to follow him, what he needed to do was to make sure that people were aware of him in a positive way and in an authentic way. So Scripture records that one day there's a man with leprosy. For those of you who don't know leprosy, it is a real thing. People today still have leprosy, and basically parts of your body fall off. Like you're walking along and there goes your ear. Oh, there's my ear. Leprosy, right? One day there's a guy who has leprosy. He goes up to Jesus. And Jesus doesn't, I will admit this. If we're walking along and there's some dude over there with leprosy, my first reaction is, whoa, right? That's not Jesus' first reaction. Jesus' first reaction to the man with leprosy was to show him compassion. So he goes over to the man, talks to the man, and then Jesus heals him. Everybody's talking about it. Because everyone else stays away from that guy. Jesus goes right to him. And then a Roman soldier comes. And in this time period, Jesus and the people there, the Roman soldiers to them are the enemy. They are the worst people that you could possibly hang out with. There was no reason at all for a Roman soldier to come to a Jewish rabbi. And yet, in this same day, a Roman soldier comes to Jesus to talk to Jesus, to ask Jesus for a favor. Now, there are a lot of people in the world we want to do favors for. But the people who occupy our land and take over our stuff and can tell us what to do and we can't argue with them are not the people we usually want to do favors for. So this Roman soldier comes up to Jesus and he says, listen, my servant is at home and he's really, really sick. And I've heard people talking and they said maybe you could heal him. And you know what Jesus does? Jesus doesn't get mad at the guy. He doesn't yell at the guy. Everybody's watching. Jesus says, okay, come on, let's go. Let's go. We'll go heal your servant. And the Roman soldier says, no, listen, I know you don't have to go. Just say that he's healed, and I know he's going to be healed. And so you know what Jesus says? He says, your faith has healed him. He goes home, and his servant is healed. That later that day, one of Jesus' friends, Peter, his mom is sick. And Jesus goes over to his mom, and he heals Peter's mom. And people become aware of this guy who anyone who asks him, who needs something from him, they come to him, and this guy doesn't turn them away. As many people come, he talks to them, and he serves them, and they get healing. So people start bringing other people, their friends, their family members to Jesus to get healed. And at the very end of that account, of that story, it says that there's a paralyzed man who'd been paralyzed for over 30 years. Imagine not walking, not getting up for 30 years. You're just laying on a mat for 30 years. So people bring him to Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He could easily have said, shoo, right? He's healed. That's the sound effect of someone being healed. He's healed. But that's not what Jesus does, because that's not the kind of guy Jesus was. He talks to the man. He says, how you doing? What's going on? And before Jesus deals with his physical body, Jesus deals with his spirit. And he tells the man, listen, you're forgiven. And then he says, get up and go home. 30 years on the mat. He says, get up and go home. You know how you get up after 30 minutes on the couch? Oh, okay. Right? This guy's 30 years on the mat. And listen to how Matthew records it. Jesus says to him, get up and go home. And Matthew says, the man jumped up and went home. He was healed. He got up. He didn't mess around. He was like, whoa, I got 30 years to make up for. He jumped up and he went home. And then Matthew says, fear swept through the crowd as they saw this happen. Now, we translate that word fear, but that fear is not like I'm scared. It's not like it's Halloween. That fear is a sense of awe. It's a sense of wonder. Like they were amazed, like, whoa, this is amazing. And it swept through the crowd. And because of what people saw, Matthew said they praised God for giving humans such authority. See, Jesus stopped to serve anyone who would ask him for help. He was kind to people. He was thoughtful. He was considerate. And people noticed. People noticed who Jesus was. People became aware of him. They heard about the good things that he was doing. They heard about how kind he was. And it made people want to interact with him. And soon there was a crowd following him. Making people aware of us in a positive and authentic way isn't easy, but we all can do it. And the question to ask ourselves when we think about making people aware of us is, how can I make people aware of me in a positive, and I'm going to add, authentic way? How can I make people aware of me in a positive and authentic way? All right, the next one is, in our word across, is see, and see is for connection. As you continue to interact with people in a positive and authentic way, you will find opportunities to connect with them. Do you know what the gateway is to connecting with people? Knowing their name. And I will admit this right now, and I debated about talking about this because I said to myself, do I really want to give this away? But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to admit it right here, I am horrible with names. Horrible with names. And so if we see each other and I say, hey, bro, hey, man, how you doing? Brother, it's so good to see you. It means I forgot your name. So I'm giving you permission right now to call me out on it. Like if I say, hey, bro, what's up? You said, no, my name is Joe. My name is whatever your name is. Tell me. Listen, please remind me of your name. It is not because I don't want to know your name. It's just because I'm horrible at it. In fact, there are some of you here who have come up to me after service and you've asked me to pray for you, and I've prayed for you that week. I just forgot your name. But, Jesus knows your name, so as soon as I said, that guy, anyway. Praying for knowing somebody's name is the gateway of making a connection with them. There's something that special that happens. In fact, when you address somebody by their name, it wipes away a lot of the assumptions that people might make about what you think about them. Because we don't address people by name that we don't like. We usually address someone by name because we like them. So remembering somebody's name is very important. Now, here's the reason I say this. We get to later on this day, right? Jesus has just healed the leper, or the paralyzed man who jumped up and ran home. And then it says, as Matthew's still recording it, he says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew. Obviously, he knew his name, sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. Now, when I was growing up, I've heard this verse before, right? And lots of lessons, lots of sermons about this. And when I hear this, I've always pictured this kind of like Jesus doing like a drive-by invitation, right? He's walking by, he sees Matthew, and he goes, "Hey, come and follow me." And Matthew's like, "Okay," drops everything and goes, right? That's how I've always imagined it. It's like Oprah giving away cars, right? "You come follow me, you come follow me, everyone come follow me." That's how I've always imagined it. But that's not how it happens in real life. We know this. It doesn't matter who the person is. If someone said, "Come and follow me," you're going to think about it. If it's, anybody, you're going to give it a little bit of thought. You're not just going to follow somebody. So for Matthew to stop and to follow somebody, what it meant was that Matthew was already aware of who Jesus was. Right? Matthew had somehow already made a connection with Jesus. And Jesus, I believe, already knew who Matthew was and already knew Matthew's name. And I believe that Jesus had already been praying for Matthew because he knew Matthew was going to be the one that he was going to call. I believe that Jesus had already invested time in Matthew. You know why? Because when Jesus finally said to Matthew, "Come and follow me and be thy disciple," Matthew said, "Okay, that's it," dropped everything and went to follow him. Right? It says, so Matthew, when he heard this, got up and followed him. One more thing. These type of connections, spiritual connections, they only come through prayer. And this isn't optional. Just learning their names isn't enough. If that's all you do is learn a person's name, you'll fail. You have to make sure that if you are, listen, I'm not saying that you can't learn somebody's name and be friends with them. That's a great thing. We all need friends. But the process of making a disciple is not making a friend. The process of making a disciple is not making a friend. And the only way that you can make a disciple is for that connection to be a spiritual connection and not simply a friend connection. And in order to make sure that it's you and the Holy Spirit that is involved in this connection, you've got to pray. You've got to pray for that person. You've got to make sure that you and God are involved in this process. So the question to ask ourselves is, how do I learn the names of people I encounter? Once you guys figure this out, please let me know. How do I learn the names of people I encounter and then pray for them faithfully on a regular basis? So we've got awareness, we've got connection, and then the next one is relationship. R and the little O, see how I found the O to make it a cross? Otherwise it would have been acres. And then I would have had a hard time trying to figure out how to make acres work. But it's a cross. Relationship. The more you connect with people, the more you build relationships with them. We all know that building relationships means building trust. Remember, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So what's the first thing that Jesus does after he connects with Matthew? He goes to a party at Matthew's house. And who does Jesus invite to his party, or who does Matthew invite to his party? Matthew invites the same people that you and I would invite to a party at our house. We invite people who we know is going to come to our party. That's who Matthew invited. Matthew invited people who were just like Matthew. This is how Matthew records it. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Now, in that culture, in that society, tax collectors and sinners were like at the bottom, right? So you had the king, you had good people, you had bad people, you had killers, murderers, and then right at the bottom is tax collectors and disreputable sinners, the lowest of the low, the unclean. And what was unfair in this system was that sometimes the unclean weren't unclean because of anything that they did. They were, because of sinning, sometimes they were just unclean because of their job. Like shepherds were always unclean, right? Ceremonially unclean and also kind of dirty. And Jesus goes and he eats dinner with unclean people. And in this culture, An invitation to eat together is very significant. You know why? Because back then, the way that they shared a meal together was very intimate. Today, it's very easy for us to go have dinner with somebody that we don't like or that we don't care about. You know why? There's separate seats, right? We can sit on opposite sides of the table, and everybody gets a menu. I order what I want, you order what you want, we have our own plate, we have our own utensils. You don't have to, what you order and what you eat has nothing to do with what I order and what I eat. But back then, it was different. This picture here is a picture of a Middle Eastern dish called mansaf. And if you've never had it, it is absolutely delicious. On the bottom, they put flatbread, and then on top of that, there's this mixture of rice and some nuts, and that's very, very tasty, yellow rice, and it's delicious. And then on top of that are just big, huge hunks of lamb. Soft, tender, pull apart from the bone lamb, and big, huge chunks of them right on top. And then they top the thing with a yogurt sauce. It's delicious. But if you go to eat this in the Middle East today, it's served on a plate, but the plate is this big. And everybody doesn't get their own individual plate. You don't even get utensils. You eat with your hands. And so what you do is, you take that rice and you just kind of clump it together into a ball. Then you reach in and you grab a piece of the lamb and just pull it off the top there, mix it in with that rice, get a piece of flatbread, wrap that thing in there, dip it in that yogurt sauce, and take a bite. Man, let me tell you something. That is so good. So good. But everybody digs in. And they're not nice about it. You know, they could have taken that lamb and chopped it up into little pieces so that you could just pull one piece. No, they leave the lamb in big, huge chunks so that you've got to hold the bone down while you're pulling the meat off. Now, imagine if you went to a dinner and you invited your mechanic. Have you ever seen mechanics' hands? I mean, today we have Fast Orange. How many of you know what Fast Orange is? Right? All right, some of you guys who work on cars, you know what I'm talking about. Get some Fast Orange on your hands and you clean all of that up. But have you ever seen a mechanic's hands who just washes their hands with soap and water? How about with just water? Because that's how they washed back then, with just water. Would you want to eat from the same dish, the way that I described it, the way that they eat there right now, with someone with hands like this? Do you know how dirty money is? Years ago, I went with my uncle. He was just entering dental school. And I don't know how it is here, but in the Philippines, when you enter dental school, one of the things you have to do is you have to get a whole set of teeth. Like, you have to get a whole set of teeth. So dental students would go to the cemeteries, and there would be people there who pull teeth out of the graves and sell it to dental students. It's horrible. And so I saw this guy, and he has a jar of teeth with gum still on it, and the money is in there. Listen, would you want to eat with a tax collector who does nothing all day except handle other people's money? Would you want to eat with him? Would you want to eat with a prostitute? You see what I'm saying? Jesus got an invitation and he went to eat with Matthew's friends. He was building relationships. He was building trust with them. And when I see Jesus there, I don't see him sitting in a corner, look at all this stuff going on and just like quietly judging people. Come on, you've done that, right? At a party where you don't know anybody, you just sit in the back and go, you know what I mean? I think Jesus was the life of the party. I think Jesus made people want to come and talk to him. He made everyone feel important and special. And so the question you ask is how can I cultivate relationships with the people in my life? And then finally, the S is spiritual conversations. When you deepen relationships, you set the foundation for deep spiritual conversations. This is the payoff. Because as you become interested in people, people become interested in you. And they will want to know why you respond to the world differently than anyone else. They want to know why you can lose your job and not freak out. They will want to know why you can have challenges with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, and you can still have a smile on your face. You can still experience joy. And when you have laid the foundation, then when those situations come up in their life, they're going to want to ask you how you got through it. And so what I want to do is the ushers in the back are going to hand out little pieces of rope. This is actually paracord. And so I want everybody to grab one of these, because I'm going to hopefully give you something to take away today that is going to help you to remember when the signs for when the person is ready for that deep spiritual conversation. So everybody grab a piece of rope, just like this. Something happens when we hold on to something. Something happens when we interact that's going to help you to remember this. All right, everybody have one? If you don't have one, then take your shoelace off. Except for those of you that are wearing boots. Yes, take the neighbor's shoelace off. Pastor Max knows what to do. All right. When you've invested in somebody, and listen, some of you, you've been investing in people you don't know it yet. When you invest in somebody, when you make them aware of you, when you make a connection with them, when you build trust with them, there's going to come a sign that they are ready for that deep spiritual conversation. And so what I'm going to teach you today, what I hope that you will walk away from here remembering, is to look for the 3 knots. Now, the first thing I want you to do is to take your rope and tie one knot in the middle. Just tie one knot right in the middle. Okay, that's the first knot. The first knot is not going well. That there is something in their life that is not going well. That their marriage isn't going well. That their relationship with their children isn't going well. That their relationship with friends isn't going well. When someone talks to you and they say things are not going well, that is the first sign that they are ready for a deep spiritual conversation. Because the only reason you tell somebody that things aren't going well is because you want to talk to them about it. All right, so the first knot is not going well. The second knot, then, now what I want you to do is take from the knot to the edge and tie another knot there. So you've got a knot there. That's the second knot. The second knot is not prepared for. Not prepared for. Yeah, we didn't exactly expect that we were going to have a baby, but we weren't prepared for it, and now we're having a baby. I thought that being at that company that I worked at for 20 years meant that I was going to be there for the rest of my career, and I wasn't prepared for getting fired. I wasn't prepared for my spouse passing away. I wasn't prepared for my spouse leaving me. When someone says that something came up that they were not prepared for, that's the second knot. That's the second sign that they are ready for a deep spiritual conversation. And then finally, the third knot, take the other half and put one more knot in there. The third knot is I'm not in church. Now, this doesn't mean you ask them, but if somebody brings up to you the fact that they are not going to church, the only reason for them to talk to you about that is because they know you go and they want to hear about it. Great opportunity to invite them to church. The 3 knots: not going well, not prepared for, not going to church. Those 3 things, if you will make yourself aware of those, if you will attune yourself to listen for those, that is the opening for you to have that spiritual conversation, that gateway into making somebody a disciple. So to build disciples, we build awareness. We make connections. We deepen relationships. We look out for spiritual conversations. Making disciples isn't easy, and it takes time. It takes intentionality. And it takes courage. Listen to how Jesus ends the Great Commission. He says, and behold. Behold is just a fancy way of saying look. He says, look.